We're live, and we are now live to talk about the weakest function in the type. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a little bit of evidence first, and we can go through. I can start with Jonathan. What do you think your weakest function is, and why?
Well, definitely extroverted thinking. I had trouble with it when I was at university and school, and somebody had to, when you're doing essays and you have to, for history, you have to back up your argument with lots of references and quotes to other work. And reading about it is fine, but the actual process of writing down things and backing up every argument you make is very tedious for me to do that. And also on forums, I used to be on forums where people would get into all kinds of arguments about all kinds of things, and some of them would demand evidence for absolutely everything you say, even if it's something I think is really logically obvious or intuitively obvious. So I had to get good at that. And my memory is not so good. I think I actually met an INTP today. I'm not sure, or I think he's an NT anyway.
So I'm sorry, Jonathan. Are you saying introverted sensing, the memory and details function?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
Extroverted thinking.
Okay, because a lot of what you're talking about to me sounds like introverted sensing, which is remembering the details. Extroverted thinking argues them out loud, but introverted sensing goes back and finds them for you.
Let's say both are kind of memory-based. There's different aspects of memory.
I'll just say one thing. I've recently been reading Jung, and TE is very fact-based as well.
Yeah.
And I think part of the definition of SI is bled over because of the STJs, because they value TE, and that's bled into the Guardians.
Yeah. So, I was saying I think I met an NT today. He may have been an INTP. I'm not sure. Or maybe an NTP, I'm not sure. But I was doing, because I've got high functioning autism, I was asked to take part in a research project, and it was to test memory. And I had these things stuck to my head and electrical charges put in my brain to simulate it. So I was asked to do a memory test. And in my own personal opinion, I was crap at that test. I mean, I could basically I was supposed to do the test, and then I would do it again with the charges on, and then a third time. And in my opinion, I was terrible at it. I could not remember a single thing. Like 5 seconds in, I just forgotten what I'd seen 5 seconds before, regardless of it. And yes, I'm an amateur historian, and it's like I've got a good memory, I just don't have good recall, which is a very particular thing.
Excellent. So what I can do is I can show you this quick blog. So this is for INFJ. Do you agree with a lot of those things, Jonathan?
Not frugal is true. I keep telling myself I'm going to be saving up. I'll be saving up. For years I've been saying that I'm going to be saving up. My income is basically the same as always. Or my spending habits are basically the same. There's no change there. So I do have more money now than before, but that's not because I've been saving. It's because of other stuff. While working, the associative train of thought frequently leads me away. So it's hard to stay on task. Depends on what... Well, yes, but it does depend on what the project is. Some things are more important than others. Tries to make the most of the resources that fall to his hands, though any entrepreneurial activity involving risk tends to exhaust him quickly. I would say yes. I've never tried them, but that's probably because I know it would exhaust me. He's spent a lot of energy on a project with modest outcome. I resent that. I do not spend that much energy on projects these days. So, but yeah, broadly speaking, I agree with this.
Right, and we did a hangout with Chris Montoya, and he agreed about the not being frugal, got slightly embarrassed and said, let's move on. And no, we had a good joke about that, and he identified with Maria with this, with the TE break, and I think it's just that I think the INFJ, Jonathan, do you think the INFJ thinks that the TE thing just gets in the way of like the FE considerations, like spoils the atmosphere thinking about such things, or not much energy for it?
It's more like it gets in the way of the SE desire to spend, and buy whatever impulsively you want to get, or whatever you feel like.
That's a good point, because if we relate it to the other type, ISFJ, maybe their inferior NE is like, oh, I could buy this and do this with it, and do this and do this and do this and do this.
I think ISFJs are better with money than I am.
Probably, that's their temperament.
Yeah, Ben, that's the temperament thing. Yeah, SJ is the temperament thing about being good with saving money.
They'll certainly tell me that I need to be better at money.
Right, now this is one of the sensory introvert profiles. This is for ISFJ. As the sensory introvert profiles in Socionics are not exactly brilliant. They have some good bits in them, but there's like it gets into some problems because of the way they define certain of the functions. But there are bits in there which can be used. But I could in Socionics, the ISFJ is very much the kind of person that will spend energy on people if it's towards people that they love and are taking care of.
Yeah.
And that's quite similar to... but I would actually say that the Socionics, in a way, it's more... In a way, it comes across as more patronizing, in the way it says that they can't... Although it does say in the NE, it really does depend on the development. It's these introverted sensory... these sensory introverts in Socionics are really a little bit tricky, because you have to go through the profile and question. It's almost like you have to make the difference between the actual type that they're describing and the way that they've written the profile, and the way the profile has got to a certain result because of introverted thinking. And we'll be getting onto this later on, about one of the flaws of introverted thinking, and even Carl Jung wrote it himself, where you try to pretzel the facts into the theory. Because the TI people love their theories so much, and you can gain leverage using TI, but you can also end up at a questionable place that should then tell you that there was an error in your TI. And so it then depends on how adaptable the person is to then change their theory. And what usually happens, and what I've learned from Maria and agree with, is that INTPs will stick to their theory and then suddenly rip it up and develop a new one. It's not as dynamic and fluid as, say, someone who values TE, who will go more with the results on the ground and the facts, and they will adapt more quickly to the facts. Obviously, temperament comes into play, where the NTJs will be, although NTJs are dynamic, they still don't necessarily want to change their plan if it compromises their master plan. And go on, Carl.
Ben, if I can just say, I wanted to react to the I like what you said about Jung saying the flaws of introverted thinking, that you try to pretzel the facts in the models. And yes, and that said, you just gave me the idea. Here goes my NE out of control again. I'm wondering if that's just their version, their flavor of confirmation bias. Yes. Human beings do suffer from confirmation bias. So I'm thinking that introverted thinking, that's just their flavor of confirmation bias. They value the models, so they keep trying to make the model work, and yeah, so thank you for that insight.
Yeah, and also, thanks, Carl. What we got here is, so this is Carl Jung's, the original translation of TI. Now, I'd like to do a separate hangout on this because it's like really deep. And also, when he describes introverted thinking, he's really describing the INTP. And a lot of people, Dario and Victor, think that Carl Jung was an INTP. A few weeks ago, I used to think INFJ, and he probably had really, really strong NI, but it's like what you've got here, and this is for, it looks like you've got the unconscious feeding the TI. So it's like, but you see here, it creates theories for the sake of theories.
Oh, that sounds very TI. But can I chime in on
Yep.
Jung's type? Not that I'm an expert here, because it's it's still being debate may not be the right word, but talked about a lot in the type community. The strongest reason for me to go with INTJ for him is, it looks like to me all of his spiritual exploration is so introverted, intuiting led. And I've known a lot of INTPs and a lot of INTJs, and it seems to me that when you get to know an INTJ preference person well, I almost always find a very deep, though often unspoken, spiritual core, and that's a piece, and they don't share that with others. And INTPs, not that they can't be spiritual people, but I just always find that with INTJ, and it looks like to me his spiritual stuff aligns so with introverted intuition. I can't get to INTP with him. It just looks like a spiritual INTJ to me.
Maybe. Go on,
My
Jonathan.
2 cents.
I have never heard INTJ for him. I have heard INFJ quite a few times, though. So,
over here in the States, we argue back between INTP and INTJ.
I mean, maybe what we could do
I've
is,
heard, I've heard a lot of Americans say INFJ.
Oh, one thing I would say in favour of INTJ is that his FE section is rather patronising towards extroverted feeling.
That sounds pretty TE to me.
Yeah. There you go, Cal. You've just backed up the break function. And INTJ is having FE as their weakest function. And Dario has publicly said that, so I'm not like talking out of turn here. And so that's what we can actually, so we did Jonathan, now we can ask Bradley. Yeah, the SI one is a little bit, but the Socionics profiles are great for the introverting types. And also, ESFP is a really good one as well. I'll need to find it. ESFP is around here somewhere. It's going to be under TI break. Here we go. This is fantastic. Now this, I'll let you read through this, Carol, and see if this rings true for ESFP. The one on the left, TI+.
I have 2 ESFPs who have been very important in my life, so I will read through this thinking of them.
Okay.
Oh yeah, they don't even try to explain the motives of impulsive actions. Both of them just want to jump in and do it, and they don't really feel a need to explain it. It's just obvious, then they want to do it.
Yeah, Jeff said they'll say something like, "Because I felt like it." And that infuriates SJs.
Yeah, I have an ISTJ brother-in-law and an ESFP preference sister, and oh, he loves and adores her to death, and she drives him nuts all at the same time. And it's that impulsivity of the extroverted sensing that just drives him nuts and makes his life lively. But it does absolutely drive his ISTJ self nuts.
Yeah, I also have an ESFP sister, and yeah, I think number 3 and number 4 definitely ring true for her.
Number 4 under TI, absolutely. My sister is a nurse. I mean, I think it's interesting. My ENFP self, I'm the modal type of the psychological type industry. She, ESFP, she went into nursing, very hands-on, and she could do all that. She got a bachelor's degree, which is rare for ESFPs, but she was fascinated by this hands-on knowledge. So she was able to, I mean, she's told me this. As long as she's interested, she doesn't have a hard time focusing. Mm-hmm. But isn't that obvious that she and I chose such careers that were so aligned with our type? Jonathan, you were grinning at one point.
I'm sure I was grinning more than once. I've got.
I think it might have been Carol. I'll let Jonathan. It might have been the moment when you said she got a bachelor's degree, which is rare for ESFPs.
Yes, that was it.
Actually, I didn't make that up. There's data on that.
Yeah, we know that. We know that, but it's still funny. Yeah. I've got cousins who are ESFPs, so yeah. But I was also just thinking of a off-topic. Victor Golenko types Donald Trump as ESFP, and this does fit him. but that's another story.
Oh no. I think anyway. We'll do and we don't want to talk about an ESTP in the presence of an NFP.
Actually, Trump's a really big topic, no pun intended. We need that for a separate time.
Yeah, separate time. So go on, Jonathan, and Carol, everyone on the TR cluster, the ESFP, as you know.
Yes, fine. I agree with this.
Right. And so, Carol, looking at this, would you say that TI is the weakest function in ESFP?
You lead with TI, Ben, so you're probably much more comfortable making a definitive statement like that than I am. I'm comfortable saying those statements align very well with the two ESFPs who've had a big place in my life. So, yeah, that looks very accurate to me.
Okay.
And I think Jonathan was saying a couple of them in particular, not Jonathan, I'm sorry, Bradley was saying a couple of them in particular made sense for him with regard to one of his relatives.
Because what I would say, though, is that I think that Socionics is right about that ESFPs can do the NE thing. It's hard for them to do the NE thing, but they're improvisers and they can. If you think of like ESFP comedians, they can sort of like go. And Jeff says he can do that when he's tired at night, and then he'll then like thinks of like weird things.
Yeah, I've noticed that in hanging out with him, that he seems to be pretty good at NE. He obviously doesn't prefer it, but he's good about indulging RNE, and he's also he'll also take things out of the context. Maybe because we do it first, but he'll also take things a bit out of the context when we're talking about like film and stuff like that.
But sometimes he'll do that in order to do a pun.
Oh, that's that's true. Yeah.
So it's like, again, it's like using a function that you don't value, not for its own sake, but for the sake of your temperament or a function that you value. So, for instance, you do it in order to say something funny, in order to bring attention to yourself, because it's like ESFP, and ESFP is some of them, when they're not being instinctively kind, they like to bring attention onto themselves. Mm-hmm. So what we can do is, now one of the interesting ones that I think is so true is like, I think this one on INFP. Now, I assume if we have a look at the control function, when it says here, does not like crowds, loud compliments, I assume that means wolf whistles. What do you think there, Carol? I think that INFP is the #1 type not to like a wolf whistle.
Being a female, I have a real hard time seeing who would like a wolf whistle.
Well, you're an NFP. I mean, I've seen it with I think an ESTP female. She actually liked it, and I was rather shocked.
You should probably, next time you get Emily in here, you should probably ask her if she likes it, because that would be a real definitive.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, I identify as INFP, and I can't imagine why anyone would like a wolf whistle either. So,
I don't know what that means. Often does over under SE. Often does not stand confidence.
This is from Carol. I tried my best. I did not have a proper human translation for this. I had the Google Translate, and I tried to reword things, and the things that are in quotation marks are exactly from Google Translate.
I would try does not stand confidently.
No, I think they mean does not stand confidence or overconfidence in others, perhaps.
Oh,
does not is Donald Trump.
I would say does not tolerate then, Ben. I think that's a good word for that meaning. Does not tolerate overconfidence. I like that. Yeah. Thank you.
So basically what happens is you have a situation where between ESTP and INFP, they're hitting each other's inflation block. The two things that they're weakest at and they dislike. So for instance, ESTP is weakest at FI and SI. In terms of being... ESTP is infinitely flexible in their tactics and political expediency. INFP is about being morally consistent. Those two things hit each other. And also what hits between another thing that irks them is the fact that ESTPs are aggressive stroke assertive, stroke go-getting, and INFPs want conciliation and are not aggressive, and they don't like the forward nature of ESTP. So you can see where they conflict there. And Dario has shown how the brain scans, so the EEG patterns between ESTP and INFP are completely different. So you can at least say that for those two types, MBTI ESTP, or the people that Dario has typed as ESTP because he has his own typing method, using a lot of Linda Berens's inventories and methods and temperament and interaction style.
Yeah, because he helped her write that. I mean, they're research partners. He was a co-author on a lot of those things with her. So yeah, that would be his.
So would you say that these are true for INFP, Carol, about can't put pressure on people? And all of those things are also what ESTPs are good at.
You know, I'm going to pass the baton because I'm not nearly as I don't have as many of these people in my life, and the ones I have had in my life, I find extremely mysterious. I find INFPs to maybe the most mysterious on the type chart. I understand INFJs a lot better than INFPs. So, and I'm thinking it's my theory. I'm open to ideas here. My hypothesis is they lead with that introverted feeling, which mostly goes unspoken. So there's this driver underneath the surface, and it totally depends on what their values are as to what the driver is. And maybe I can't see those. This sounds odd because, you know, mine are just in a different order. I have all the same top 4 functions they do. So isn't it mysterious that I find an INFP so mysterious? I can't explain it.
I was about to say that my brother, I can't not decide if he is an INFP or ISFP. Based on this, he wouldn't. This sounds like a much more of a pushover than he is. I don't think he would like this thing. I do have good reason to think he is INFP, but I mean, it's hard. You can go back and forth with them.
Jonathan, can I tell you one thing I've noticed since you brought up ISFP and INFP? The one thing I have noticed between the two of them is INFP can get you. They don't get on the soapbox like ENFPs do, but they actually can get kind of fierce going for a cause because they lead with those values and those ideas. Whereas ISFP in Kroger, Otto Kroger, in his system, he called ISFP the gentlest of the 16 on the type chart, and that has been my experience that INFPs are quiet, but there is even a more just almost lamb-like, just sweet gentleness to ISFP, just in my experience. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so what was saying to Jonathan in the side is maybe the INFPs that you're encountering are Enneagram Type 9, and Type 9s are very mysterious types, and they have elements from different Enneagrams. If they were a Type 1, they'd be like leading a lot more with their ethics and values. So Enneagram comes into play, and so that will help you, Carol, like learning more from Enneagram from Catherine with your INFP friends. Go on, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was going to say my brother's not that like this. He's much more. It's hard to say without bringing up personal information, but when we were younger, we would fight all the time, physically fight and get into scuffles and stuff, and things like that. And this gives you the idea. He does not have trouble using.
How big is he?
Force. He's slightly taller than me and a bit stronger, and that's annoying. He's supposed to be my little brother, and he's taller than me, the bastard.
Yeah, I was going to bring up upbringing. Like, if you have like an INFP that's had a tough upbringing,
I wouldn't say tough,
but you know, I mean, you have proximity to Glasgow, and Glasgow because my image of Glasgow is through Rabsy Nesbitt and Taggart.
Okay, those were from the 80s, but okay.
Oh, we went through into the 2000s, Jonathan. Did Taggart?
Well, Taggart, yes, but even so. No, that's who he is. I tend to type him as either a self-pres 4 or a sexual 6, and both those types can be relatively tougher. That could make them tougher. So it's yeah.
Right. So Bradley, I'll ask you about these bullet points in SE. Do they fit you? Or INFPs you've known? Because you might not want to admit to this.
Some of it I could admit to, like overconfidence. Yeah, I don't like that in people. Like I think of if people are needlessly overconfident, or if I don't think they have a good reason to be overconfident, it really does bug me, because I don't think there's any reason. Like it always strikes me as odd when people don't have any doubt, because I think, I mean, it's one thing to believe in yourself, but to believe so strongly in yourself to where you can't make a mistake or you're infallible is something that I've always had a hard time, like, getting my head around how anyone can be that confident.
That makes sense to me too, Bradley. That makes sense to me too. I understand that.
Now,
Right.
So ENFPs can stand up to this better. This is what I was saying about extroverted sensing in ENFPs. It's not valued, but they've got a bit more oomph to them, where they can fight for a cause and fight back. And so you can probably see that in intertype relations, where the ENFP will stand up more towards people being aggressive than the INFP.
Well, Ben, I think you explained that to me once, which I didn't know before. It made a lot of sense. You were quoting, I think, Dario, that you automatically, if you're introverted or extroverted, you automatically have more command over the extroverted or introverted. And I will say, and now it takes a lot to push me to this, okay? I mean, it has to be important and big. Like, I was dealing with my mother needing help this week. And boy, when I'm defending my mother and trying to get her what she needs, I can get fierce. But it takes something that important for me to go get that and stand up to something. But I can do it. And ENFPs, you know, our nickname is champions.
Yeah.
We champion causes. And yeah, we don't like conflict, but we'll go out there and stand up, have the energy to stand up for our values.
Yeah, and especially when ENFPs are younger and they're more idealistic and they're really into their cause. There's a lot more things that can be triggering for them, especially when they're egged on by compliant media. End of political statement. Right.
Well, actually, can I make a confession here about a young ENFP? So I was visiting a church in another town, and they were having a discussion at this point, and they were talking about how much they had spent, how many hundreds of thousands they had saved to get the new pipe organ. And there I was, like 22 years old, 23 maybe, and I was so offended that a religious group had spent what I considered to be a horrific amount of money on a thing inside their church, when there are people who are hungry and homeless. And I was just so upset. I am so grateful to this day that I kept my mouth shut. But you will not believe how close I came to just standing up in moral indignation over this. And it was triggering me. Okay, young, undeveloped, 22, 23-year-old ENFP. Thank God I'm Southern enough to know better than to open my mouth in a public situation. But my impulse was, oh my God, I'm so offended by this. And now, you know, I'm not nearly so judgmental, but boy, at that young age, that really triggered a judgmental little fit I had inside my head.
I think you should have said something. But I mean, that's just too nice, Carol. But that would not have annoyed me a lot. Go on, Jonathan. You got something to say?
I think he's mulling. That's a very serious look he's giving us now.
Oh no, I was wondering about INTPs and their extroverted sensing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, maybe sorry, but before we switch to that,
Yeah.
I will say I do have a good friend who's an INFP, and because she's an Enneagram 6 and has an Enneagram 1 tritype, I think she's very good about being assertive, and because she has all of these, she has a lot of values, as you know, most FI users do, but she is very good about not letting people step on them, and properly asserting herself when she thinks that someone's doing something wrong.
I do think this may be one of the worst SOCIONICS profiles or glyco profiles, the INFP thing here.
I'm glad you said
Because,
that.
yeah, I quite like all of the other profiles, but this one seems like it's describing a very particular type of INFP rather than the INFP as a whole.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
I see a
I
lot
never,
of them quite like this, and they are accommodating in Kersey as well,
Even
behind the scenes.
yeah, like I can see what they're getting at, but a lot of it's really poorly written in general.
Well, it is a Google Translate, but okay, let's go on to the one. You'll probably agree with a lot of the INTPs. Agree with the one for. Let's see if it's. I've got to get the right one. SE. Is it this one? No, it's this one.
Yeah.
Here we go. And a lot of the INTP is like this profile. So this one's for me. I think, Cal, were you married to an INTP?
Yes, isn't that interesting? You remember that? Yes.
Yeah, I think you told me that in private. I don't know. I can't remember.
I imagine it was not on air that I told you that, Ben.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no. I shouldn't have brought that up.
Well, actually, now that you brought it up, I actually loved and adored him. He was a very bright computer guy from New Orleans, very well educated. I absolutely adored him. And isn't that interesting that his introverted thinking, it only drove me crazy when he wouldn't remember to say it out loud. When he did say it out loud, it was fine, but he tended to not say it out loud. So there was this mysterious thing going on underneath everything that it took me years to figure out because I couldn't get him to say it. But bless his heart, as we say in the South, he led with introverted thinking, so it never occurred to him he needed to say it out loud. But I did absolutely adore him.
You want him to say the L word?
No, not that. No, say out loud what his reasoning was.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I would have to push sometimes to get the reasoning. And he was very intelligent. His reasoning was usually quite good, except he sometimes didn't include the other people thing because he, didn't quite know how to do that. Right. But it wasn't because he was a very gentle soul. He was this is how I learned about, I'll say this and stop. Linda Behrens puts 4 types in the behind-the-scenes social style: INTP, INFP, ISFP, and ISFJ. Yeah. And I saw how he just beautifully bore the behind-the-scenes presence. And this literally happened to him. Here he was, a computer guy who worked at a software place, and he was the person people would appear at the door of his office and say, "Excuse me, but have you got a minute?" And they'd close his door and they'd talk about something they were upset about. This man did not want people coming in and pouring their heart out. He in no way put out a sign. The problem is, as a behind the scenes, he was such a good listener and such a non-judgmental listener. Linda said people are actually drawn to those people to talk things over because it's so honoring to be listened to the way someone with a behind the scenes preference will listen to you. And that was mysterious to him and me at the time. And then I studied with Linda Behrens, and I realized he was a living example of what she was describing.
Yeah, I think in that generalization about behind the scenes is that within that you've got three feeling introverts in ISFP, ISFJ, and INFP. So they're like bump up the average in terms of the listening ability of behind the scenes people, because with INTPs they will listen if they're interested.
Right. Well, he was also Southern polite. He was brought up to be a Southern gentleman, so he actually did the listening thing, or at least pretended he was listening well enough. But bless his heart, it was mysterious to him. He really did not want to know these inside details of people's lives.
So we've got here with, so number 1, not good at single-mindedly pursuing his goals. His apparent stubbornness does not help much with that. Yeah, that's true. Because
apparent stubbornness, what does that mean exactly?
Well, it's...
I'm sorry, where are we, Bradley? What are you pointing to?
Number 1 in SE minor.
Number 1.
Okay.
Second line in stubbornness.
They get stubborn with their theories.
Yeah,
so I
can see that.
So, for instance, before they then maybe come to an epiphany and they'll move on to another theory. And so like Victor Galenko like keeps changing. People complain that he keeps changing his mind and keeps coming out with new theories, because to them it just means that they have to keep learning more and more stuff. But to him, you know, he's moving forward and changing. You know, and he's been doing this since the early 80s.
All you had to say was Victor Galenko, and I would have immediately known what apparent stubbornness means.
Yes.
Of course, he does great work, but yeah, stubborn could easily describe how you've even described him to me. I think stubbornness could easily fit that.
Well, maybe I have not. I mean, what? I don't think I've said stubborn. I've said static.
No, I mean
model to model.
You haven't called him stubborn, but you've described that sort of behavior.
Anyway,
Okay.
what I say,
we'll go into that.
what I say in private is one thing. There's a different thing.
So Ben, let me ask you about number 6. Do you tend to ignore the rules that you disagree with rather than arguing about them? You'll just ignore them and blow past them? I'm looking at number 6 under the break.
Yes, if it's well, I don't like arguments. I might just like try and get around it.
Yeah.
But here, repelled by atmosphere of crude competition, and so you can see like here ESTPs will hit this as well, because a lot of the things here that and this is where the theory of socionics intertype relations comes from, is that the things that people really dislike, if that's done a lot, think of the type that does that the most, and then you're going to get conflict between those two. Now, in this case, this actual block shows the supervisor in terms of, this actually shows where the ESTP has a bit of a mental edge over the INTP, because the ESTP has strong TI. Although it's auxiliary, they've got that mental edge over. So it's like they can compete with the INTP in terms of TI, and they've got much stronger SE. So it's a asymmetric relationship. One thing I would add about this break function is that it tends to be all or nothing, and used in a way which is without nuance. So it's what I would say. What it should have said with in the INFP profile is that they can overreact under pressure. So maybe if someone tries to like force them to do something or puts a little bit of pressure on it, they react to it as if it was worse than what it actually was. That they feel it is worse than what it was. And I think INTPs overreact as well, because I think maybe because they see where it could go with the NI, with the intuition of time, rather than what it is at the moment. The NI sort of sees the fear of what it could be in future. So, for example, an INTP might feel that they're being an INTP or an INFP might feel that they're being slightly bullied in the moment, and then their imagination goes away with them as to where this might lead.
Well, and Ben, how that makes sense to me is introverted intuition is their 5th preference, which is BB calls the opposing personality. So that kind of makes sense what you're saying in his system. Yeah,
NI in INFP and INTP is, I think it's the 6th function in the MBTI 8 function model.
I beg your pardon. Yeah. It's the 6th. I'm sorry. It's the which Cynics. I apologize. Yeah. Thank you. It's the which Cynics function instead of opposing personality. And boy, we can really get triggered with that which Cynics function. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like it's like their imagination goes away with them when you hit that function, and it's worse than what it is. And so it's like, I can give an example of this. When you had Thomas Jefferson, who most people think was INTP, and he could, and yeah, when you had the Barbary Coast pirates, and these pirates were going after American shipping, and he thought he could do a deal with them at first. But it was almost like he could see the writing on the wall. And he says, right, we've got to fight them, we've got to wipe them out. So that's like INTP, where it's like, if you're hitting that function a lot, they might go, oh, there's a threat. There could be a real threat in the future. Kill them now. Because you're hitting that function really hard, then you're going to take the logic of, if something's going to be a bigger threat in the future, if you know logically that someone is a really big threat in the future and you can take them out now, that is where, and you're hitting that function where they're really feeling the pressure, then they might take drastic actions. And this is what the break function is like. It can overreact.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that a lot of this rings true for me as well. A lot of this INTP SE break function is it can, I think it could ring true for anyone who has an SE break, but I think some things like the number 6 and the number 1 is probably more exclusive to INTP.
I can give you two types that don't value SE but can handle it quite well: ESFJ and ESTJ. They can handle it quite
ESFJ,
well.
yeah, absolutely.
ESTJ. Because usually they can use the willpower to enforce, their FE or enforce their TE. ESTJs use it quite well, and usually ESFJ is like using it on their family, because they're not living up to expectations.
As one of the many people who I'm sure has an ESFJ mother, I can attest to that. Absolutely.
Right, let's go through what we got here.
Bradley, I had an ISTJ mother, a very young ISTJ mother. Oh yeah, my mother's a kick butt and take names steel magnolia.
Oh wow. So, Carol, how much time do we have left? Because that will let me
adapt. It's 4:30. I said I could. Excuse me. Another hour and 15 minutes I can make.
Okay. So this is for ENFJ. The idea here is that I would say that ENFJs and ENTJs overwork themselves, don't know how to relax because they're going towards their goal, and that might have problems with stress. What do you think about that, Carol?
I think, we're talking about ENTJ, ENFJ. They're both very, very determined, big picture, command resources, I think Oprah. Yeah. And I had one of my healthcare providers was a physical therapist, and he was a ENTJ, which doesn't sound natural for ENTJ, but think about it. Extroverted sensing is his tertiary function. So the physical therapy stuff the sensing stuff of that was actually a break for him. And yet he said it would not have been totally fulfilling. This guy was a CEO of a blended medical practice when he was 24 years old. How many types end up as CEOs of a blended medical practice at 24? I don't think that would have happened if he hadn't had preferences like that. And he said, he was young and stupid enough to believe that, this is doable. And then he didn't realize until he was in his 30s. My God, how hard that was what I did. But he was bright, and he actually needed the extra challenge of managing that practice. He said, I never would have been happy just being a PT. He said, I love being a PT, but I have to have more. And I think that ENTJ demanded that he have that more big picture CEO kind of demands on his life.
Right. So I'll get more into the theory later on, but just so this is for ENFPs. Let's see if this is true for you, Carol. We can do this one by one.
Okay.
Now, I can see TI break in ESFPs quite clearly. When it comes to ENFPs, it's harder for me to see it because I believe that it's almost as if, say you got a computer with a rubbish CPU but a great graphics card. It's almost as if the graphics card's doing a bit of the CPU's work. And it's almost as if ENFPs, their NE can get by in doing some of the TI's work because they can just NE it and see the connections, and so they can get by maybe easier with the TI things than ESFP, because ENFP is more abstract. And so maybe TI is a little,
That
because
makes sense.
TI tends to be abstract.
And I'm drawn to teachers and mentors who have strong TI and teach me their models, and I love them. So yeah, I think you're right. I think they're appealing to my end with their models. And this is embarrassing. Number one, oh my God, that's me. Number two, if I care deeply about it, for example, I used to do technical writing, and then I led technical writing teams, and then I wrote my own book. So I can care very much about the word level, but I have to really care. But I can't do that finicky detail stuff. Drives me nuts if it's not something I like or care about. Does not respect formal subordination. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Number 4, outlines and designs complicate the situation rather than help to solve it. God, I hope that's not true. Number 5, does not always find convincing reasoning for his viewpoint, does not draw logical conclusions out of his negative experience. I don't think 5's true of me.
But what about other ENFPs you've encountered?
Well,
Does it depend on
I will say this. I think I was forced as a child to develop analytical reasoning because my mother, my father, my stepfather all had it. They were all computer people. And there I was, this little bitty child, and I had a young mother who hadn't developed the other languages yet. So I think I got forced to develop it early, and it was probably incredibly stressful. And I think I've met a lot of ENFPs who hadn't developed as much of it as I did. And I don't think I did it willingly, Ben. I think I got forced into it by, Linda Behrens would call it my developed self. You know, there's the core self, your genetics, and there's the in wiring, there's your developed self. I think my developed self caused me to develop it. I have noticed a lot of ENFPs who didn't have enough extroverted thinking, for example, to do project management. Right. It was just, I don't think you can do project management if you can't pull up some TE. Yeah. You don't have to have that as your dominant, but I don't think you can do it without being able to pull on it. And she actually wanted to do project management, she said, but she couldn't. And she was very, very intelligent, and she was a beautiful writer. Wrote beautifully. Her first drafts were better than my final copy. She was wonderful, but she could not do the project management. She gave up on it. It was just, and looking at that afterwards, I think she is intelligent. This is where you can't confuse intelligence with the ability to do a particular thing. Yeah. I thought she's so bright and she's so hardworking. Of course she can do it. But you know what? She didn't have enough developed extroverted thinking to do it without causing herself great stress.
What's that?
And I think, ENFP. Okay. She was an ENFP, but nothing in her life had forced her to develop that analytical piece. So I think if something forces us to do it, we're quite capable of it. But I think a lot of ENFPs don't go develop it because nothing in life drove them toward doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff has talked about similar things where he was like forced to develop his tertiary TE to survive.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And again, there's the benefit of EP mindset where they're adaptable, but they have to sort of like be forced into that situation to like do that thing to improve that function.
We look at our options and we see, if we go grab that thing and do it, we can do this. So yeah, I do think we're optional. Bradley, what are you thinking on these thoughts? Imagine you've known a good many ENFPs.
Actually not as many as I would have liked to. I know one ENFP well, and this strikes me especially, like for some of the he's dating an ISFJ, and I haven't asked him I haven't gotten around to asking why exactly he's doing that, but I suspect a lot of it's something to do with these like the 2 and the 3 and the 4, like having sort of an ISFJ to sort of help guide him through that, because he is not well developed yet. I think he's making efforts to become quote well developed, but there are some things that he still needs to have. It's also about you respond to a need, right? You're not good at doing something, and then eventually you hit a place where it's like, okay, I need to get better at this. He just he hasn't hit that point yet. So
well, Bradley, I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry.
No. I mean, he's definitely he's definitely making an effort, but some of the things, it's just he has no need to get better at them, so he just doesn't do them at all well.
Well, I'll I'll tell you why he's dating an ISFJ. I have got a friend, a fellow ENFP, who insisted she was going to find me an ISFJ man to date.
Ooh.
She said, Carol, they are the most supportive, loving, supportive people you could ever have in your life is an ISFJ, and she was actually determined to go find me one. Unfortunately, she has not located one for me yet. But I have never I've had ISFJ friends, but I've never dated a ISFJ. I think I'd value them as friends. I'm not sure I see the love match she sees, but she thinks ISFJs are wonderful partners because they're so loving and supportive. There's that there's that loyalty, that deep guardian loyalty, and then the extroverted feeling in the second position makes them really want to be helpful and supportive, and they, comfort you and just be supportive. She just sees them as wonderful partners in that way. Okay, Ben, I just had to speak to that because that was advice given to me.
So that actually fits what Victor thinks about romance style, where the NPs go well with the SJs if they're balanced out individuals, because the SJs help the NPs with logistics, and also they're not aggressive in their romance style the way SPs can be, especially STPs.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. She would say that Kiersey correlates differently. However, the point has been made that Kiersey was a therapist. So guess who were the couples he saw?
Those
the couples that needed marriage counseling. They were in trouble.
So
I have noticed that NFs, I do think Kiersey's got something going on, that NFs and NTs very, very often do get married, which is why Hillary's INTJ and Bill's ENFP makes sense to me. But I've also seen another pattern that NT men will very often, or women, I've seen it in men and women, will often marry, and I've seen this over and over and over again in couples I know, an NT, male or female, will marry an SJ partner, and that person is grounding for them. Very grounding for them. My ISTJ mother, my INTJ stepfather. I have an ISTJ friend who has an NT husband. I know an INTJ married to an ISFJ. These people have been married for like 30 years, okay? These were things that deeply worked for them. And so I have witnessed SJ being very grounding for N.
Right. So this is a little bit of theory. This goes a little bit hardcore TI, but what do you expect from Victor? The function that is created, the one a person should create almost from scratch in order to survive. The usual name of the function is break, as its activation tends to slow people down and drain them. Yeah.
Now, wait, what are we looking at ISFJ now? I got lost.
This is like from the model of like the big graphic that explains the model G. I've just thought I'd take a little close-up shot of the inflation block, and then this number, and so basically, it's almost as if Victor thinks that it's hard for somebody to learn from it in this position. I asked Maria what number one meant. She said she didn't really know. But so the first sentence I don't quite understand, but the second sentence there, the usual name of the function is break, as its activation tends to slow people down and drain them. So, for example, Jonathan is drained by having to do TE stuff. Carol, you're drained by having to do mundane stuff if it's like too finicky.
Oh, God knows. God knows. Yes, absolutely.
Bradley's drained by too much external pressures and stuff. So am I. Whereas SPs and especially SE DOMs love external pressure, and it activates them.
Oh yeah, it makes them go. It makes them go forward.
Yeah,
it's the in charge energy. It makes them go straight into it. It really fires them up. They love it. Like the way Trump loves all that conflict. He absolutely revels in it.
But Kirsty was onto something with, say, ESFP. They love it because they can adapt and stuff. Not because they'll be going like get things going, interaction styles. So it's not necessarily confrontation for an ESFP. The ESFP will get confrontational when they're resisting somebody encroaching on their freedom.
Yes, I have witnessed that in my life, absolutely. And they can be very fierce. They can be very fierce.
Yeah. Victor once said, don't put ESFPs and ESTPs together because they will just fight each other with. And Jeff has talked about that because, like, the ESTP will try to control the ESFP, and the ESFP does not want to be controlled.
No. No, they do not.
That's true. I have siblings who resemble both the types, and wow.
You get sell tickets.
Ben,
Yeah.
are you the person who taught me? I think it was in one of these sessions. I love this quote that improvisers or artisans may be about power, but it's always about freedom.
That is the Jeff Miller.
And I've never met him. I've never met him on one of these calls, but oh my God, that sounds just absolutely picture perfect for the ESFPs I've known. Absolutely, it's always about freedom.
Yeah, it's I think the exact quote is, it can be about power, but it's always about freedom. Yeah. Right, and so then we've got the example here of ISFJ. I don't know if this is true. Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the idea that they've got strong, creative FI in ISFJ, and they like to bring people together. Maybe this is more like an ISFJ that's like an Enneagram type 9, where they want a little bit of harmony and stuff. And then he got here, expects the business logic part to be custom made for his activities so he won't overexert himself.
Well, ISFJ would be stressed by too much TE stuff going on. They would want it to be laid out in a logical, linear way so that it makes sense and could be easily followed.
That's great what you said there, Cal, because that actually fits Victor's SEI profile, because it does say under TI Plus Launcher that they do like stuff that's very by the book. So his SEI profile, out of all of the sensory introverts, is the one that most matches like a Berens Nardi, Kersey type profile. Whereas the other ones don't match at all, really. I mean, that's why I don't show them a lot. Because it's bad for marketing, Socionics.
Yeah, this looks really mysterious to me in a way the others did not look mysterious. The others, especially the last couple we looked at, made a lot of sense, and this just looks mysterious to me.
How do you mean?
Well,
what, for SEI? SEI is one of those sensory introverts, and they're all a bit weird.
Why are we saying SEI?
Well, that's the
sensing ethical introvert. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not okay. Sensing ethical introvert. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the Socionics has this like tricode.
Okay.
That is not very helpful at all when you're communicating with people in MBTI.
So
I'm just saying these seem written differently and just not as obviously true as the others. This just looks like it's written differently and more mysterious to me. The other, Bradley, are you having that experience with this as another NF? This just doesn't look as logical to me as the others did. And
well, maybe it's because you're kind of seeing it out of order, because how the theory is supposed to be presented to you. This is sort of like the framework of of all the other profiles are sort of built using this framework. So because because you've already kind of seen the
because you wanted to do TI, so
okay, thank you.
It goes well though, because we've got Jonathan here and we can talk about TI and TE thing. It went well. We adapted, and then Dario.
Bradley did a good job of honing in on what was confusing me. Thank you, Bradley.
And then we've got here and Dario wrote, and I got it in his book, so Dario himself, and Dario has said on the public record that, FE is not his greatest function. And he said that publicly. So he's put here the least preferred function, along with the function in role position, because the preference for the functions in management and demonstrator positions which have maximum energy. Okay. So basically, I'll read out what Dario said, because this will be in better language for you, Carol. So, the processes opposite in nature to the preferred ones, but occupying the same attitude, are significantly least preferred by almost everyone, over 95%. For example, someone who prefers introverted sensing and extroverted feeling say an ESFJ will most likely have least comfort with introverted intuiting and extroverted thinking, typical of, say, INTJ. So basically, he's said there, well, if we were to interpret it, that they're they're opposite types, ESFJ and INTJ. This helps resolve, and then he goes on to a little bit that you'll be interested in, Carol. This helps resolve a question. The tertiary function develops in the same attitude as the dominant process. Previous studies may have used items that did not clarify whether processes were being used internally or externally. And then
there's still a great debate, at least on this side of the pond, about that tertiary, and there are some. Only, I think, one really high-level person who still argues the tertiary is the same as the auxiliary. Almost everybody else has gone over to the same as the dominant. And at least in my life and of the people I know, it looks to be true that the tertiary is the same attitude as the dominant.
Dario said something that convinced me. The reason why the people think that the break function is the tertiary is because they're encountering people in therapy where the break function is really come to the fore, and so they mistake that for the tertiary.
That's fascinating.
That's Dario's answer. That's Dario's reasoning for why they believe that.
Fascinating.
Right then. So basically, if you see someone who's a nervous wreck, if you see an INFP or an INTP who's a nervous wreck, then their break SE is going to be to the fore a lot more than their tertiary SI. Or if you see like an ENTJ or ENFJ that's like got a lot of stress on them, their break SI is going to be more to the fore. In Socionics, SI is like internal bodily harmony and taking care of yourself and homeostasis and all that kind of stuff. So the SI DOMs tend to be like good at taking care of their bodies and internal sensing and being aware of their bodies and stuff. That's the theory anyhow.
Oh yeah, and I'm so bad at it that I didn't understand. I thought, it's extroverted sensing if it's you here in the moment in your body, but it had to be explained to me that awareness of inside the body was introverted sensing. That's how bad I am at it that I didn't even understand. I don't even use it that way. I mean, me being aware, it's taken me decades to learn how to be aware of actually being in a body.
Yeah, and Jeff, another Jeff quote, SJs will tell you about their medical problems.
They won't?
They will. They will tell you about it. Even when you don't want to know, they will tell you about their medical problems.
And a lot of SI detail too, like like a TMI moment.
Yes. So Carol, I'll now Bradley, I would ask Carol. Now don't give it away. Now it may. Oh, it gives it away. It might give it away a little bit. So Carol, if you read through FI, and then I'll ask you which type you think this is describing. Jonathan, please be quiet. I want to see if Carol can work it out. Or one or two types, maybe you think it could be.
FI, we're talking trickster, right?
Yeah.
FI trickster would be...
Oh, no, you know you've worked it out, Carol. You use your TI to work it out.
That's all I can do here.
I thought you'd do it with like a TI approach by matching it to evidence.
No, if
but you've worked it out using TI.
Because I use because I know the model. That's how I do it. So
exactly.
If FI, then FE is in the tertiary, which means TI is in secondary, and either NE or SE is in the DOM.
Yes,
right?
That means you've worked out the two types using TI. That's how good you can become TI ENFPs out there if you train up. You can be like Carol. Use a model.
Well, it was like learning these models from Linda Behrens and then from Beebe. It's like it just made so much clear. I mean, as an NF child in a family where nobody else used intuition, I was just this strange creature from another planet, and it was very mysterious. And growing up and learning these models, it's like, all of a sudden, all this mysterious experience I'd had made total sense. So it's like I became enamored of the models because they made sense in my life. Bradley, INFP, there's not that many of you either. Have you had the experience that these models make sense to you of what you've experienced?
Do you mean in other people, like looking at other type models and sort of, or like the model of my own type, or could you be more specific?
Oh yeah, it made my earlier life. I was nobody was like me, so I wanted very much to belong and be like everybody else. But I was in an SP world, and until I got to college, like Linda Barron says, sometimes introvert preferences don't often meet many others until they get to college. Well, if you're born into a family of them, you don't think you're so odd because there are other people like you. I wasn't. So learning about SJ and SP and all this stuff, just all of a sudden people started making sense to me in a way I didn't understand why I was so different. And it made me feel less odd. Well, I don't know if it made me feel less odd man out, but it was just mysterious to me up until that point how I was different. So I'm interested in you and Jonathan as fellow intuitive feelers. Is that your experience that these models just help make sense of things that were mysterious between you and other people before?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you can go first, Jonathan, if you have more to say.
I said, oh yes, definitely. That's my
Yep.
that's my contribution.
He's done. INFJ, he's done.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Yeah, I'll say, yeah, it definitely made sense. Yeah, well, just typology in general kind of like really clarified my own existence and how I'm seemingly incompatible with certain people. You know, being more able to get along with more people more than others, and some people who like can't stand me. And people who I can't stand. So just typology in general is really good about that. In terms of the actual models,
well, you learned that from Socionics. I'll just put a little plug in there for Socionics about the intertype relations.
It's hard to say, like, because there's so many different typologies. It's hard to know, like, at what point I realized, you know, what realization came from what model, from what system.
Yeah.
But I will say Socionics subtyping is probably what I took away from Socionics. Whereas when I had initial trouble typing people, Socionics really helped to clarify the nuances between Jungian types. Whereas Enneagram sort of helped with the motivation aspect, the cognition aspect, understanding how people were seemingly so good at functions that they didn't prefer, to where they could present as a different type. Socionics really helped with that because it's better at presenting all 8 functions. The one thing about MBTI I really don't like is that people seem to lose their preferences and not. People seem to think that you only have 4 functions when it's just you prefer those 4 functions to the other set of 4.
That's because it's been taught badly, Bradley. When it's taught well, they don't think that.
and even worse, that the misinformation constantly spread. So it's hard to contain all the misinformation, and of course the internet doesn't really help with that. So Socionics was great. The Socionics models are really good with them helping me understand how people use functions outside of the 4. Like I will say my ESTP brother, he seems to relate through shared experiences, and I didn't realize how much it took out of him to do that because you know, being a very much present context kind of person, past experience is sort of how we communicate first and foremost. So that kind of goes with I guess how they use SI. So yeah.
Right, so we've got 2 more of these to go through. This one being ENTP, and then we'll look at INTJ. And then what I'll do is I'll go through my sheet that I did comparing the Beeb demon stroke role function with the trickster stroke break function. And so like making the case for why model G is better than the Beeb model in that one respect, like about, and also about the way I think that the Beebe model was created, the TI of the model. So, for example, in fact, if you have a look on the other webcam, this one that's less quality. Oh, if I go that way, is that the right way? If I go this way?
That way. There you go.
Yeah, that's good right there.
Right, so if you use the TI, so if the green is ENFP, and so you got the top 4 are the valued,
Right.
the bottom 4 are the, so it's like the TI would be, therefore SE must be the weakest function, because that's like you're using the structural logic there. So that's what TI would say. TI would say SE is the weakest function if you're using that model. Now, what that would say to me, if you've been, and what that should say to you is like, oh, interesting. Let's look at the data. Maybe there's something in the model that we need to look at. And now, if we look at ESFP, it would say that NE is the weakest in ESFP. I wouldn't say NE is the weakest in ESFP, just as I wouldn't say that SI is the weakest in INTJ. I would say that FE is the weakest in INTJ.
Oh, yeah. And Beebe would explain that he thinks your 4th function is the one that gives you the most trouble and the one you have to struggle with in order to make your life work, not your 8th function. He would say it was your 4th function.
Oh, yes.
And I certainly find that, the so-called inferior function, and I certainly find that SI gives me way more trouble than my 8th function, which is extroverted sensing.
Oh, yeah, I can quickly go through that. Now, can
I ask you something before we leave this?
Go on, then.
Because I'm looking at NI, and that really looks very much like some INTPs I knew. It looks like to me that applies as much to them as it does to ENTPs.
Maybe.
Yeah. Read through that under NI. Does that seem to apply to you, Ben? As an INTP? As INTP preferences?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of like any subtype of. So what tends to happen is, in me, the NI goes out the window because something more interesting occurs. So this is the idea that NI is focused on one thing. It's like intuition of time. It's like focused on one thing or fewer things and how they develop. And NE, as you know, it's many things, many possibilities, and going towards the most interesting thing and thinking more laterally rather than concentrating on one thing and seeing how it develops. And when the NI is with TE, that tends to be with sticking with a plan and seeing how it develops. And so arranging and mobilizing with the NTJ, arranging with INTJ. So they tend to be good at long-term planning, the NTJs, and the NFJs are about change and potential in people. So mentors in terms of like guiding a group of people, ENFJ, guiding a movement. INFJ works well as a counselor. Again, guiding someone, seeing how they can develop. The NI with the NF though.
I have a colleague who's has INFJ preferences, and even though it was never part of her job function, she was the person. About 15 years ago, they found that difficult meetings went better if she facilitated. So a big part of her job became having to facilitate, especially difficult meetings of great concern to management. And her INFJ diplomatic skills just got through it beautifully. I mean, she really just excels at doing that.
Yeah, and Kersey would say that the NFs can do all of the other diplomatic roles, but he said that within that temperament, the two furthest from each other would be ENFP and INFJ, because like, and even in their preference, like they're opposite, like one's extroverted, one's introverted, one's perceiver,
right.
One's ginger.
We're the opposite. We have the same functions in the opposite attitude.
Yeah.
Beebe also has a theory that I'm sorry, not Beebe. This comes from, no, it is Beebe. Beebe says he has a theory, and this is why ENFPs are drawn to INFJs and INTJs and vice versa. One of us leads with extroverted intuition and the other leads with introverted. which means our fifth functions are the opposite too. It's NI for ENFP and NE for INFJs and ENTJs. He says it's like we're drawing, one person's dominant is drawing the other person into their fifth function to help them develop it. And he said it can really set you off, but he said there's kind of a magnetism of that pairing. It's not necessarily sexual, but there is a kind of magnetism. And I've seen my life. I mean, INFJs and INTJs are the two rarest types on the chart, and they are all over my life. I think I'm an INFJ, INTJ magnet. They just keep showing up, and they're rare birds. They shouldn't be all up, but they are. And BB was the first one who said something that made sense of that, because two of my closest female friends are both INFJs, and it's only BB's logic that makes sense of that for me.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, right now I can feel the magnetic pull towards the laptop, towards Carol, and I have to go. No.
Right. So I'm going to give BB some love, but what you said there about the inferior function. What I'll do is I'll say what types are like when their inferior function is not well developed. So you can imagine TE DOMs with very undeveloped FI. It's like they're not going to be able to know what to measure and what to value, because TE is about measuring and FI is about ranking things in order of value. So they're not going to. And also, what can happen is with undeveloped FI, they can go a little bit Enneagram 3-ish and go too much towards external measures of success rather than internal measures of success. They go too much towards the kind of, where they lose their sense of self because they've not developed enough FI.
Well, they can kind of run over people and trample on values in the process because they're just considering the end result, and that's all they're measuring by.
FE DOMs, I imagine that, and just thinking of this on the spot, the FE DOMs would, I imagine, if they're too much open to other people's opinions and things, then without that inferior TI developed, they're not going to be able to maybe reconcile other people's views and then come to their own logic. Maybe it's like they listen to too many different people and too much of their thoughts are based on other people's rather than their own subjective logic. What do you think would happen, Carol, with FE DOMs that don't have TI, that don't develop enough TI?
I think you need to ask Jonathan, even though he's FE auxiliary, because that's just mysterious to me. Being so FI, I don't know.
Go on,
Jonathan, what do you think? I mean, I see Oprah. Oprah's one of the most famous ENFJs walking around today. And I don't see her being the least bit confused by considering all these other people's values. She goes out and gets all these different things and puts these people in front of a microphone and, puts them on the television. I do think they have trouble with the introverted thinking thing. Kind of drives them a little nuts. They want to stick with the doing what's right, considering of people thing, rather than go analyze it with introverted thinking. I think it kind of drives them nuts. Jonathan, what's your thoughts?
Okay, I'm going to be honest, I missed the question.
Yeah, so Jonathan, what it was about was we're trying to say what the types are like. We're just going to concentrate on the 8 function types. So we've done TE DOMs, what they're like when they don't have any FI development. So it's like when there's no FI. So we've talked about them. They go a lot like Enneagram Type 3. There's no inner core of values to help restrain their TE. Now we're talking about FE. What happens to FE DOMs when they've got no TI? Is it like they can't analyze their feelings? Their thoughts are too much from the outside and other people? What do you think for FE DOMs with undeveloped TI?
Well, I've actually seen in Facebook groups, I've had TI debates with ENFJs, and I'm the more logical one. Basically, it was like they were committing some more logical fallacies, and they were less concerned with being exact, and it's things like that. It's hard to say. I don't really know any ENFJs in person. I've only known them from online, so it can be a bit tricky for me to comment there. And even online, they're not that common. So it's
so maybe lack of consistency. there. Within the ENFJ, we've got levels of health going into it. Yeah, so it gets a little bit complicated. Okay, we'll put a partial wing around that. So I would say TI DOMs with no FE, totally solipsistic. So it's like they don't take into account what other people think, and seeing as other people don't exist anyway, they don't matter. So imagine TI DOMs, especially INTP, would become solipsistic. FI DOMs would like completely go with their FI idealism and ignore all kinds of data. If they're too much in their FI and have no developed TE whatsoever, then they're not looking at facts.
Well, Ben, can we go back to TI Dom?
Yeah.
Linda Barron says and it's in the Myers-Briggs handbook. Linda Barron says that INTPs have been universally identified as the most oblivious mate to have. And she's an INTP preference person.
Yeah.
And and not like they're not caring or mean or anything. Just they don't notice that stuff. They just have to work on learning how to notice it. Just oblivious. They just come across as just oblivious and not noticing the people thing.
And SE DOMs with when I say no NI, like very undeveloped NI, right? They're not thinking the consequences and might end up dead. But that's me. That's my bias in the break function, where I see SE as reckless and reckless audacity and stuff. So that's another thing where bias. And so what can happen, Carol, is you can get a lot of bias that comes from that break function.
Oh yeah, and type. There's a lot of bias in type stuff because even though people try, bias can slip through. I don't have as much SE bias, I don't think, but I mean that's part of the temperament theory, Ben, that supports what you're saying. Is extroverted sensing is all about right now. Looking at it's like the future's not even real to them. It's all about right now. I know an ESFP who started thinking about retirement when she was in her 50s. I'm not joking.
Maybe Enneagram type 7.
Good thing she was married to an ISTJ who had started thinking about it when he was 18.
Yes. So the NE DOMs, I would imagine, they're thinking about all the things they can do, all the possibilities, and they forget to have a drink and forget to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Amen. You nailed me.
Right. Now, the NI1 is very good from NLP point of view. NI DOMs, too much NI, too much in downtime, too much in the unconscious, not in uptime. And also maybe too much through time, too much seeing how things are developed, rather than being in time in the present moment. Because we can say that NI is through time and downtime, and wait. Interesting sounds. I'll kill her mic. Right then. Oh well. All right. I'll wait till she gets back, and then we'll talk. We've got about 2 because for this one I wanted to do it as like a bit more empirical rather than like blowing people's minds with the theory up front. I thought I'd give them the bullet points. Right then. So, Jonathan, do you have anything to say?
No, really. Just all I'll say is I once saw people completely off topic. I saw people arguing that Eric Cartman from South Park was an ENTJ, and it bothered me so much that I actually took excerpts from this profile to show them, no, he's an ENTP. And it's such a bizarre typing to have, but they were so adamant that he was that type, and that was just bizarre. So yes, I do like this profile because even though it's a fictional character, it totally fits.
Yeah. Also, this one has a little bit of bias in, I believe. This EN, because it's actually quite. Actually, this profile makes them look like a bit of a.
I just said Eric Cartman, so that's what it makes them look like.
Yeah. Also, it's like this particular ENTP profile. It makes them look like that inventive genius, but also in that FI plus, it does make them look a bit. Right. So Carol is back. and I can put her mic back on because I need to, oh, you're back. So, Cal.
I'm sorry. I had a 17-and-a-half-year-old cat walking in the house yelling at the top of her lungs at me.
Okay.
I had to go do something about that.
Right, so if we say, Carol, that NI is downtime and through time, so in the unconscious and about development, and we say, and so if that means that, and if somebody is too much through time and too much downtime, then and they're not very, and they've not got much SE developed, then that means they're not going to be very good at being in time, in the present context, and they're not going to be very good at uptime, which means having all of their attention directed outwards rather than inwards.
That makes sense.
Right. So that's two things from NLP folks that help to explain NI: the downtime in the unconscious and through time.
Actually, Ben, would you please define through time?
Well, through time is where they can see the development of things, the trends of things. So you're not really concentrated on how things are at the moment. You're looking at the trend.
Okay, thanks.
Right. And the bigger picture and things like that and how things can develop. Right. So we went through all of them. That's a little bit of love towards baby. So now we're going to ENTP. Let's go through these bullet points. Carol, do you think these fit ENTP? It might be a little bit harsh, but do they fit some ENTPs?
Well, I see some of it. Some of these things I see more clearly than others. I think it's hard. Number 5, they may want to be supportive, but I think with that FE and the tertiary, they have a hard time knowing. They end up going to the introverted thinking to try to be supportive, and introverted thinking is kind of like a scalpel, and it's usually not terribly, helpful and comforting and supportive. So I think they're not very good at being supportive, but that's not to say their intentions aren't to be supportive. They have a hard time, I think, finding the language of support because it's FE language. Does that make sense?
Oh, Carol, you really are reading a good intent into them.
I have a very dear friend who's ENTP, and I love her to pieces, and she's very entertaining, but we quit doing coaching together when we had a session where she just sent me to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean there ever was, and it so baffled her how that happened that it scared her to death, and we never traded coaching again. And yeah, I do believe she wanted to help me, and I do believe she couldn't help it that she couldn't.
I think that FI break and FE break is something that occurs more in the males than the females, because there are statistics out there about the difference in degrees in these semi-autistic traits. And Dizzy Dolly herself has got Asperger's, and she's talked about how males have it worse than females. And I think a lot of these bullet points apply more to male ENTPs than female ENTPs, although a lot of that might be cultural as well, where ENTP is making inappropriate jokes and stepping on toes because they don't have a inner feeling of where the line is.
Yeah, I had an ENTP business friend, very creative guy, very entrepreneurial, and he was married to an ISFJ wife, and he would say something inappropriate and she'd kick him under the table. And instead of using her wisdom and say, wait a minute, must be something going on here, he would say out loud, what are you kicking me for? Because he ENTP, he was very rebellious against being reined in. And I tried to coach him on that. I said, look, you married the perfect person to help you with that piece of your life. And instead of letting her help you, instead you're ignoring her wisdom there, her natural wisdom there, and brushing her aside. And bless his heart, he just could not. I mean, I saw, there was that active revolt against her extroverted feeling wisdom, which she was trying to help him with.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting there, Carol. It's like when you said rebellious, that made me think roll SE.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That SE is not their weakest function, that they can go to it.
Oh, yeah, ENTPs can be forceful. Yeah,
a lot more than INTPs. So as we were saying, when we went through the SE break, yeah, ENTPs.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so so for instance, ENTP is... So this is what they can do, and you may have noticed this, Cal, where they can get into arguments with people and they can argue from a position that they themselves do not actually agree with.
Oh yeah,
They want
it's the fun of it.
to win an argument.
That's right. It's the fun of it for them.
From-
Absolutely.
So one night they might do it from one side and win the
Yeah.
argument, and then we'll try and win it from the other side and
Right.
win the argument.
Absolutely.
And if you do that to an INFP, they're like, no, how can you be like that? You must argue
Oh.
from the truth.
Oh yeah, ENFPs don't like that either. Trust me.
Yeah.
That is, I have had to learn not to judge them for that because yeah, it's just totally.
Oh, I think
counter-
you should judge them for that, Carol.
Your FI shining through.
Oh, yes.
Your role FI shining through. Yeah, the only thing I have to add is that I wish I knew that many. I don't think I know any male ENTPs,
Good on you.
but I'm not sure if that's a coincidence or not. But I will say a lot of the ENTPs I know are females, but I don't know them well enough because I think I bore them. I think it's not.
I'm sorry, Bradley. I think you're onto something there, though. I think it's unless they want you to. I think it's very hard to know an ENTP well because
Yeah,
they
I
have to
think so,
let
yeah.
you in.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
You know, extroverted intuiting, introverted thinking. There's not much about letting in there.
Also, I would argue there's not much there because they entertain so many different points of view. There's no real central core to them, and they're a little bit morally pluralist, so we say, because they can see all the different angles on something, and they don't necessarily believe in essential truth. And they can even be drawn to philosophy and learn lots of different philosophies and stuff, and say there are no moral absolutes. And I think most ENTPs would think there are no moral absolutes, and that there's moral relativism.
And
that.
yet, INTPs, I think, could feel quite loyal to a certain model and a certain. I mean, you always use principles instead of values. So, isn't that fascinating that having the TI in the dominant versus the auxiliary position makes such a huge impact?
There's a libertarian philosopher called Stefan Molyneux, and he argued against natural rights, and I got a little bit angry about that because I believe in natural rights. But he actually changed it to like an ENTP version of natural rights, where he called it universal preferable behaviors.
Did you just call Stefan Molyneux a philosopher? Because that's.
Well, he knows about philosophy and he knows about Austrian school economics. But he is an ENTP, though.
Yeah.
Those small doses.
I mean, he's on YouTube. He's not.
Well, lots of people call themselves philosophers these days who aren't exactly knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
Right. So, Carol, have you been through...
Actually, Ben, before we leave this, seriously, this is bothering me. That number 8 control NI. I'm looking at that, and I'm seeing the INTP I was married to there.
Okay,
And
let's have a look at this as well for myself.
So you look at that and let me know. That looks like to me that very much applies to INTPs as well.
Yeah.
Not that that helps the model, but it looks like it to me.
Well, they are very close to... They are close together, as Kersey would say, the NTPs.
I mean, being distracted, always being late. You know, time wasn't really real for him. He'd get lost in what he was doing, and then kind of surface, and we'd be an hour late all the time.
Yeah, I think INTPs with strong NE, the NE is going to suppress the NI because the NE is about the multiple possibilities, and the NI is about one plan. Especially NI in NTs is about sticking to the plan. It's about people's personal development with NS, but NI in the NTs is about sticking with the plan and developing the plan. And NE is about ideas and doing what's the most interesting thing.
Because NI is a sense of knowing. Barron's describes it as you just know it. You're not quite sure how you know it, and you can find words for it if you have to. But introverted intuition is about a knowingness, and that's what can make them seem so a little arrogant sometimes, and maybe some kind of not willing to listen to the other side because they're so certain of that NI insight they've got. They're willing to go for it.
I can give an example of an NI feeling. When you read Carl Jung, and he talks about all of these mystical things, you have a feeling that there's something to it, And I think that is where it's like hitting the NI, where it's like you can't explain why, but there seems to be something to this collective unconscious stuff. And even though you can't empirically prove it, there seems to be something there, like a feeling. That
Yeah,
there's something there.
I think that's why he seems so NI to me as opposed to INTP. I see him as much more INTJ because I just see that introverted intuition is huge for him.
Carol, how much time do we have left?
10 more minutes.
Bloody hell! I've got to get a crack on. Right, so if we go to
Wait a minute, y'all can go on after me, Ben. Just I'll go along 10 more minutes with you, and then the three of y'all can continue to cut off for me.
Okay, we have here. Let's go through these bullet points. This is for Dario's type, INTJ. And let's see if you think this is true for INTJs in the FE minus block. It might be a little bit cheeky. It might be like extreme INTJs.
Tell me what ILI means. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's the SOCIONICS code. Go on, Jonathan.
Introverted, logical, intuitive. So INTJ.
Oh, thank you.
Number 2.
Yeah,
Sorry, number 2.
ENFP, by the way, is EII. Sorry, I.E.E. Yeah.
Yeah, this looks pretty obvious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, INTJ is weaker at this than at SI.
Yeah, I think I identify my dad as INTJ, and I say like number 2 and number 5, especially for him. And I think even my brother and my sister both noted number 2 themselves, and have told me, that he goes from not upset to irate very quickly, fast temper. So that's what I have to say about it mostly.
I don't understand why the numbers under NE all sound like strengths of NI to me.
Oh, let's have a look.
That's such puzzling to me.
Sometimes, like Dario, sometimes certain things may be put under in different functional buckets.
Okay. Because I'm seeing these as true of INTJs, but these don't look like the problems for me.
Well, this
know intuitively, number 2, know intuitively what suggested signs are promising and which are not. That sounds more NI than NE to me.
Well, it's because of how strictly Socionics is defining NI and NE. So in Socionics, it's, as it says, there's intuition of perspectives and alternatives. So it's about different viewpoints, whereas NI is intuition of time and so on. So, I mean, remember, this is Victor Golenko stuff, and he's an INTP. It's everything very strict definitions about what counts as what.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Well, the break made a lot of sense to me. The control makes sense to me too, but it just looks like it's showing how they're good at NI, not how they're bad at NE.
Right. So we've got about 7 minutes left.
Oh, no.
Go on,
no, it's not saying they're bad at NE. That's a different thing. The FE, they're bad at FE. They're not necessarily bad at FI. NE.
NE. Oh, okay, that helps, Jonathan. Thanks.
Also, it fits Jung. Basically, what it is, Carol, is that is called the control function. It's like you've got a lot of information for that function, but you've not got energy for it. So it's like NI DOMs have lots of ideas, but they ignore them because it gets in the way of the master plan.
Yeah.
And NE DOMs know about intuition of time and stuff, and theoretically they could do it, but I don't want and they can see how things can develop, but they don't want to do that because it's boring. They don't want to like change their ideas and stuff. So it gets ignored. They have high information for it, but they ignore it.
Can I explain my relationship with NI as a NE DOM? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, go on then.
I clearly function in the world NE. That's very clear to me. But in my personal life, I'll call them aha moments or epiphanies, where just this thing comes up and it's like, oh my God, that is so true. And that's true for me now. And I needed this insight. And I think that's my NI speaking through. So it has a very powerful impact on my life, but I don't have control over it. Like I go out there using NE all the time, but I seem to be on just the receiving end of what comes out of NI. Does that make sense?
That's exactly how I experience NE.
Oh, wow!
It's the,
That's funny.
the receiving end of
The
it.
receiving end. That's cool. Oh, Ben, I think we have a new quote. This was good.
Go on then, say it again. And what we can do is get quickly to the Dario ones. Got to make sure we get these in.
Well, I'm just intrigued because it was the opposite was true for Jonathan as an NI dom and I'm an NE dom. Is that we experience the opposite attitude, that function, as being on the receiving end of it, not being in control of using it. Just it happens for us when it happens, and I see NI is very important, but I don't have any control in making it happen. It just happens when it does. And he was saying that's exactly his experience of extroverted intuition. So I think we stumbled onto something kind of helps see these things. Thank you, Jonathan. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, NE is a bit like a torrent at times, especially when Jonathan is
It's a bit like, I'm sorry, it's a bit like a what?
A torrent.
A torrent. Oh, yeah, like Robin Williams, absolutely.
Yeah. Right, so we've probably got about 5 minutes left. So, Carol, if we go through these quickly but insightfully, so how many of these boxes are you ticking, or are you, or reasons for not ticking? Comments on.
For whom? Whom am I ticking these for? Myself or someone else?
Yourself,
Carol. Okay.
This is introverted thinking.
Okay, actually, I think I do number one because I have studied with Barron's and Beebe and love it. Now, number two, I'm probably more guided by my values. That's what drives me to go after a certain thing is my values instead of... The model is a way of understanding, but it doesn't drive my action. Detach yourself to analyze. Well, I do that problem solving sometimes. If it's a problem, already the tools I'm using don't work. So yes, I'll try to use different tools, but that's probably not natural for me. Number two, take apart something. Oh no, seriously, no. Easily reference multiple frameworks at once. Oh yeah, but it's just in my field, personality type. I love doing that. Number three, use leverage points to get the maximum effect with minimal effort.
It's a bit jargony, that is, for me, leverage points.
I'm sorry, what, dear?
I'm just saying that's a bit jargony to me, the term leverage points. But I think it means using a model to gain advantage.
I use a model to understand something. I probably don't use it to execute anything.
Right, so you're using TI models for NF reasons.
Exactly. Well said, Ben. Absolutely well said. They serve my NEFI well. Analyzing could treat somebody to recognize what doesn't fit. No, I need to hear someone else kind of lead me through that, and then I'll make my own decision. But I really benefit from TI teachers. Fine tune a definition or concept. Oh yeah, right. No, I'm about believing and going for it. Okay, I'm not about analyzing. Though I do appreciate hearing Linda Barron's and John Beebe analyze it.
Right, so because we have a little bit of time left, so I've got here from Dario's great book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership.
You love that book, Ben.
I want plausible denial. I want an excuse in case Dario finds out I've been showing bits from his book. Great book. Endorsed by John Beebe. I think John Beebe. Yes, John Beebe is on the back.
There you go.
There it is. John Beebe. It's a bit blurred, but there he is. John B. Something. It is he. So, possible misuses of TI, and you might relate to this, Carol. I'll just go on the screen. So here we go. Sometimes use of introverted thinking process becomes rigid and dominating because of stress or because it is used without skill and without other processes to balance it. When this occurs, we may feel sure that something can't exist or can't possibly be true because it doesn't fit a specific criterion or principle. So it's like it has to fit the theory, and so we can ignore evidence if it doesn't fit.
Yeah, but I have to be real stressed for that to be true.
Yeah. Well,
I imagine real stressed, that's true.
But INTPs can fall into this, where they see the world through the lens of their theory. So this is this is when TI is used badly. Find it hard to accept evidence that contradicts our mental framework, perhaps even when data is clear cut.
I think that's the human experience, Ben. I think that's what is it, confirmation bias?
Yeah.
I think that's what confirmation bias is all about.
Over-specialize and perhaps over-apply our specialized framework to all aspects of life. Who could be guilty of this? Right. Appear to others as calculating, ridiculing, or uncaring in our interactions, even when we don't intend those attitudes at all. I think that's mainly for the TI auxiliaries.
I think so.
I think ISTP, that rings true for STPs as well as NTPs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Out of all the TPs, INTP is the nicest. Right. Provide criticism and find it difficult to
not
offer.
by choice.
Right. Lowest. Here we go. Provide criticism and find it difficult to offer suggestions for improvement. As you said there, Carol, I think someone with not very good. You said about not very good at offering comfort because it's like the TI.
Right,
It
yeah.
can find a hole in something or build up a system, but it's not very good at the practical
Right.
solutions.
I remember once thanking Linda Behrens for some. She had read. She promised me that if I wrote an article for a journal, she would be my first reader for it. So I had the confidence to do it then, and I thanked her profusely because her comments were just so insightful and wonderful, and they made it better. And she kind of sighed and said, "Carol, I wish everyone in my life were as grateful for my criticisms as you are." Because she says not everybody is. But you can see it was being applied in a perfect situation where it was truly helpful to me to be critical of that. So I was loving it. But every day, day in, day out, people may not be appreciative of hearing the TI cutting things away and finding fault. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also I think INTJs tend to use TI more critically than INTP.
She's INTP.
No, I was just saying that what I've seen in behavior, INTJs use TI to like rip up other people's theories, and like INTPs generally use it, build and construct the theories. And,
interesting. I've never noticed that. I'll look for that.
And also INTP is not really as argumentative as INTJs.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
So here, this is the definition of TI. Victor. Now, the reason why TI plus is a little bit weird, TI plus is like ISTJ. This is because the MBTI ISTP reads a little bit like an ISTJ because it's like, this is where Victor's TI has gone a little bit, as we went through that problem there.
Gone a little bit awry.
Got a little bit awry because it's like TI is about logic, therefore ISTP must be like this. So that's the result that you get to with. So when you read, I don't even call the I don't even call the SOCIONICS ISTP model ISTP because it's not really like ISTP. It's LSI, logical sensory introvert, and it's a little bit more like MBTI ISTJ. But this -L, David Kersey did connect to. And I think Linda Behrens would probably connect to that one as well. Logic of fractal structure.
Oh, yeah, that looks like them to me. Yeah.
Right, so we've got those two. And I'll just show how Dario... Oh, yes, this is where we talked about... Is that... introverted sensation. Oh, yes, Victor Galenko on TI. This is a good one. I'll let you read through that. Because Linda Behrens is actually mentioned here. VG on TI.
I don't see Behrens. Point it out.
Oh, it says right there at the bottom. Victor is referring to Linda Behrens. And then he said...
It's behind people's faces for me. Would you roll it up a little? Sorry, I can't seem to move where people's faces are.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know how to fix that.
Oh, dear. Oh, it just says, you have to trust me, Victor is referring to Linda Behrens'
I can see that now, thanks. Okay.
Okay. So this is just him on TI.
Okay.
The -L makes...
It's definitely about analyzed. Behrens' language for this is analyze to understand, whereas extroverted thinking analyzes to execute.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right, so we've got here, and then we'll just have a look at how Dario defines TI. Detach from a situation to study it from different angles to fit it to a theory, framework, or principle. Check to fit for accuracy. Use leverage gains to solve any problem. Now, that does seem to lean more towards INTP than ISTP.
It does. Although I will tell you, my father was an ISTP, and he was an IBM systems analyst, and he, he didn't say much because he was inside that introvert, very TI dom, but he loved his computer stuff, and he loved solving those problems all day long. So maybe it is. INTPs are conceptual, so you'll hear them talk about it, but ISTPs aren't. So you don't hear them saying anything about that introverted thinking. But I imagine inside his head, that's exactly what was going on.
Right, so TI...
Wait, does that make sense to other people that they're not being conceptual means they wouldn't be talking about it?
I think so.
Yeah, and they'd understand it to apply it.
Exactly.
Yeah, he would apply it to, making the computer program work is a real tangible problem to him. And in his spare time, he took vintage cards apart and repaired everything and put it back together and built rooms on houses. That was his, doing something with his hands and solving the problems he needed to make those things work physically. That was what he did to relax.
So maybe the theories for an ISTP are like tools to use to solve a problem. Whereas the INTP, they're just interesting in themselves. Theories for theory's sake.
Oh, yeah, very much about it. Well said. Yeah, for one, it's about...
Jung wrote that.
Well said.
Right, so we've got here for TI, rely on interior regions of neocortex, adept at deductive reasoning, defining and categorizing. Yes, but the problem is, deductive, sometimes we're deducing from things that are not 100% so.
Real.
Yes, and we can end up
real?
and we can end up at a questionable place.
Right. Actually, that can happen to all of us, dear.
Yes. So, and that's where you get the subjective nature of it, as Carl Jung is always going about objective extroversion and subjective introversion.
May quickly stop listening. I love it. Linda Barron said one of the reasons she gave up she to begin with, she had done her PhD under Kiersey, and she was a psychotherapist to begin with. And she did it for years, and she said when she finally she could listen and listen and listen, as a behind-the-scenes person. But once she'd figured it out, she just got bored in therapy. She just had to wait for the client to figure it out, and she switched over to teaching and consulting because she was just tired of sitting there. Over the years, she learned faster, and she could figure out the problem so much faster, and it just got boring waiting for the client to figure it out.
Oh, dear. So that's someone developing their... Oh, yes, something Dario mentions as well. Women are better listeners than men. And he says that the best ones, female Japanese INFPs, are the best listeners because you've got three reasons. One, because females in Japan are taught to listen very well. And also because INFP is one of the best at listening. And yes, an ISFP is very good at listening if they're curious.
There you go. He also said, and I've heard him talk about this because I took his class, INFP, and because he's got the brain scan stuff to validate this. He said you can see that they'll be all blue in the zone, listen, and then boom, they hit the wall where they've decided against this, and they're done. But they've got a very long fuse, and they listen for a long time. But once they decide, no, this thing does not jive, I'm done. And it's like the brain switches like that and goes into not listen mode.
Yeah, that was what BB said. This is what somebody said about BB, about the demon function. And this is their and again, this is their TI. And again, this is how TI can go wrong, in my opinion. But all of these models can have... It's like INTPs arguing with each other with their subjective theories. No, this TI is right. No, that TI is right.
Okay, this is very heady, but I think this is what he talks about when he says your eighth function can be the demon or the DAEMON, the diamond. It's where you can get an absolute gem that transforms life for you, or it's the demonic that you could just get dragged down into.
Oh, what did Maria call it? She called the function you can use it as like a sword. She says, in her opinion, that the demon function should be called the sword because it can be used either way. and it tends
like it's a two, like the expression, it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah. And so this is basically the Beebe model, and he's got
Right. It
SE
is the
is
BB
weak-
model.
SE is weakest in ENTP, but as we've gone through them all, hopefully I've proven that really it's the trickster that's weakest. And then this is something I wrote, and we can finish on this. This is something I wrote where I did a little proof of why I think the break is weaker than the role function. So I did the TI proof, where the lead function in INTP is introverted and judging. And so opposite vertness of TI is TE, FE, SE, and NE. Opposite vertness of TI and opposite JP leaves SE and NE. And since NE is already being used in the auxiliary function, that leaves SE as the one that is doubly opposite to TI, because it's extroverted and it's the opposite JP.
By the way, I'm really saying what you've got a note here about NB, ISTP resembles have SE. I really resonate with that. That looks very distinguishing between ISTP and INTP. That makes a lot of sense to me, but Ben.
Yeah, I added that added that afterwards, because I had to make sure that I didn't leave anything out that I could be attacked on.
I like that because I think it will explains my ISTP father. That SE would drive it. He'd figured out, and then the SE would want him to drive him into action on it, rather than just sit around conceptualizing. He would analyze, but want to move into action once it was analyzed. I get that.
Yeah, I've written here that the weakest function in ISFPs and ISTPs. So John Grinder, ISTP, I reckon. Dario and Victor agree on that type. TISI. And so and you know how he wrote in the meta model, he was against complex equivalence. And so maybe an ISTP might say you're comparing apples and oranges a lot. Whereas INTP might be, all the NPs are more likely to compare apples and oranges, to see the connections between apples and oranges. Whereas ISFP and ISTP are like, no, they're completely different things. You're comparing apples and oranges. You're losing the nuances of each set of circumstances by making this broad comparison.
Or the concrete sensing reality of them. It's like they're resisting the going so conceptual, you lose the physical realness of it that's so different.
Or the little details within the context of the situation is missed out when you compare situation and situation B. Because SE is about immersing yourself in the present context,
right,
and therefore about immersing yourself in the details of the present context. And so an ISTP is not as likely to want to generalize, and they would be against. Right. And so that's why he had that thing about people can make the meta model errors, complex equivalence, and I would imagine that NFPs would be likely to make the kind of statements that he wouldn't like. No, like moral equivalences and things.
Right.
Might really annoy an ISTP. So that would be their break function, NE. And because I just think that NLP contains a lot of things that are indicative of an ISTP. And also, he loves NI as well, John Grinder. So, Carol, are you there? Are you paused? Are you moved?
I am. I'm reading.
Okay.
I'm reading carefully the ENFP part.
Okay.
I don't think I disagree with. I think the word weakest is tricky for me here. I think the function I struggle with in this lifetime is clearly the fourth one, SI. But I think so the word weakest is not helping me here. But I think you're onto something in that TI, the seventh function. I don't seem to be able to launch off and do it on my own, but I love it when experts like BB and Behrens do it, and I appreciate it, but I'm not able to originate it myself. So in that sense, I can see that. What BB's talking about is the one, I think he's talking about the one you struggle with not the one that
Right.
you're just less knowledgeable in using. So I can kind of make space for both of you in this. You remember ENFP? I see both sides.
Yeah, okay, very good. And also it's like holographic panoramic, like to see different angles. And there at the bottom I've given like the TE example, where I've like given evidence. So for example, INT is better at FI than SE. Compared to ENTP, INTPs are more loyal, but less good under pressure, less confident, can be judgmental, especially about ENTPs and ESTPs. So you can see like there's the comparison between the two NTPs. ENTPs are better under pressure than INTPs. INTPs tend to have a stronger FI, are a little bit more loyal. And then with and then that quotes Bill Maher when he said men are only as loyal as their options. And then Beatrice Chestnut wrote, Enneagram 7s are only as loyal as their options.
Don't I have 7? I don't have a problem with loyalty. Jonathan,
I think you're number 2.
Oh.
I think you're a 2 lead. And also NF.
Yeah,
so
that's
more
true.
loyal.
Well, it depends on the 7 other factors. So
Yeah, and so we've got ENTP is better at SE than FI. Something better came up. I can imagine them saying. Only as low as their options. Compared to INTP, better under pressure, can deal with conflict better, stand up for themselves better. ESTP, better at NE than FI and sees little value in FI. And this is Morgan, Jeff's son. INFPs run away from me.
Actually, I can see that ESTP, I can think of a famous ESTP who would have absolutely no patience at all for FI stuff. Just none.
Yeah,
just not
Donald
even
Trump.
present. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Donald Trump. And then also, this is what Kersey wrote about the ESTP, and their mates may in time come to feel like possessions or negotiable commodities. So maybe Melania should read that profile. Right.
Well, I have to go, but once again, this has been delightful. And Jonathan and Bradley, thank you for, I just enjoyed our conversation today.
Okay, so
Ben, thank you for all the work you put into making these happen.
okay, thank you. So we got through it though. In the end, we got through it. I always have to like adapt to like what is the best way to. And I just thought for this hangout, the best way to do it was to like give examples
Absolutely.
of it rather than do too much TI. Right then, so I will stop the hangout and we'll have a little chat. So bye bye, folks.